Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Shelley Hillesheim, who is a commercial real estate broker with Trinity Team Real Estate. Shelley, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you all about the market and commercial and kind of what sets you apart from the one or two competitors I'm sure you have statewide. You know, there's really plenty of competitors. So we need to talk about, you know, what you do differently, which is really a spectacular way to educate people on what their experience will be like working with you. But before we get into that, what are some of the your background and what led you even to the real estate field focused on commercial real estate?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Everybody's got their interesting journeys and stories, and mine, I think, is part of that mix where I actually got involved in real estate on accident. And I'm glad that I'm here, but it was an interesting pivot for me at the time. So I was I'm an author and a speaker, and there's life cycles to books, and it was winding down, and I was looking at potentially writing another book and beginning that process and interviewing people to begin building the content around that book. And in that process, I interviewed somebody that was involved in real estate development and took a tour of some properties that person owned in the Denver market, and that's where everything shifted. So I got really interested and intrigued in some land and a project that potentially could go on that land, and that's where everything started.
So when you think of real estate, you know, it's pretty vast. You can, you know, flip houses, you can, you know, hold and rent, but you got intrigued with like the creativeness of seeing this piece of land and then what could it be? What could, the outcome be? What was it specifically that kind of drew your attention to like the development side of things?
Well, it was just the possibilities, I believe, in the creative space like you were talking about, because I definitely have that side of myself, and I can't even really explain what happened at that time. It was just, I know exactly what needs to go here. I understood what was going on in that area and what development had happened, and there was kind of an opportunity for something that I thought could really bring a lot of value to that area. And I said, if I go try to bring the parties together to bring this project to life, would you let me have a seat at the table in the conversation? And that's really where it began. And I loved that aspect of bringing the creative potential to the space and to the project and all of the different parties that need to come together to bring something like that to life. That was pretty phenomenal for me.
Yeah, and kind of like I love seeing a deal come together and all the intricacies, right, and everything that it involves that way.
Absolutely. There's just so many moving parts and ways that deal structures can come together and ways to be creative and problem solving around it.
So is there specific, I know within the realm of, you know, real estate, you've got residential, commercial, but within commercial, let's drill in a little bit deeper there. What are some of the different ways that you would work with clients? So like, for instance, if someone is thinking, you know, development, why would they come to you?
That's a great question. And I have moved a little bit away from development as a specialty because it's a very slow process. I'm still very interested in that, but it kind of has to go on the sidelines in the background, while for me, I like deal velocity and I like energy and a lot of activity around deals. So I moved more into that brokering space where I can do more deals and be more actively involved and work with a lot of different people in that space too, buyers and sellers and tenants and landlords. And we focused a lot on a particular geographical location in North Denver and looking at all the potential that exists in that area to really be helpful and be a resource to all of those different types of people that are in the real estate industry and what they're trying to accomplish, and provide them a very boutique, hands-on, client-focused experience.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really big piece, because I would suspect that commercial real estate has a lot more kind of impactful things that happen in transactions, that if something goes wrong, it could go wrong really big. And so that's really concerning. But what are some of the things that when you work with a client that you make sure that you are really dialed in tightly on, that maybe you hear other experiences that they've had didn't really go so well, so you want to make sure that these things are really polished up well, and then that really enhances the experience that they have with you?
Definitely. So I would just say, just jokingly, the first thing I do is pick up my phone, because that is a notorious situation with, unfortunately with commercial brokers, is trying to get them to respond to phone calls and respond to emails is a challenge. That is not who I am. I am an extremely responsive human being, and I really believe that my clients deserve that. So that's just kind of jokingly aside. But I think that matters, and it matters how you show up for your clients and how you respect them and their time as well. And I've built a lot of systems and processes around how I negotiate through an entire transaction with my clients and what they're experiencing all along the way, so that they feel prioritized, they feel like they're getting the communication that they need, they're involved in all of the big discussions around negotiation and trying to find those creative solutions throughout the deal-making process. And I show up in that space in a really big way with my clients, and that's where I feel like the boutique experience for them really makes a difference.
Yeah, you've said creative a couple times, and so that catches my attention, because I know that in real estate, way back in the days of creative financing and creative deal structures, is there room for creativity on the commercial side of things?
Oh, absolutely. Every deal is so unique, and I think there's an opportunity to look at it in a vast number of ways. So that's where the creativity piece comes in, is understanding all of the options and opportunities and ways to get something done to get a deal across the finish line. Yeah.
So let's kind of work up like on the fly here. Give me an example of a project or a transaction or a case study without mentioning names or specifics, but what's a good transaction and a good creative project look like?
Well, let's just take the market of the moment, which is what we're dealing with right now. And there's a lot of unknowns in the market. There's a lot of, I guess, apprehension about how are people going to get into space. But there's definitely interest in leasing versus buying. Let's just take that as an example. Okay. So if somebody looks at a space and they really would like to own their own space someday, but they right now are a tenant and they need to go kind of into a tenant situation, maybe due to financials or not being super committed to a size of a space or whatever the circumstances are for them. But there's so many ways that you can look at that and say, okay, what if we did a deal where it's a lease to buy situation and the owner of that property is interested in selling that space? Then we can put a deal together that allows them to lease something for a period of time. Maybe that lease money goes towards the purchase. Maybe that lease money is just pure profit for that landlord during that period of time. But you're working towards something that's a goal for that particular tenant to be able to be their own owner, user at some point in time and get the benefits of owning the real estate.
Yeah. When you were describing that, it reminded me of an episode of The Prophet with Marcus Lemonis. Do you ever watch that show?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's a really incredibly interesting show, and you just learn so many business lessons. But this is so tell me, in the real world, would this be possible? Because in Marcus Lemonis, who's like a mega celebrity in the business world, it worked for him because he had TV cameras. Maybe it wouldn't work in the real world. But anyway, he was taking his client over to see this big, huge commercial space to move their business to. And I forget what type of business it was, but it looked like this big, enormous warehouse, open warehouse space. And he said to the owner, hey, we want to have the first 9 months, well, actually, I think he said the first year rent-free, because we're going to come in and do this big build-out. And then in the caption, the show said, typically this is not, feasible, but we like to start here. We like to see if we can get some free rent. Well, in these creative transactions like you're mentioning, is there ever any time where you would say to the owner of the commercial property, has been sitting here for X number of months or years, and you're not getting revenue at all? Let us come in and sign this nice size lease lengthwise, but we're going to need a handful of months, whatever that number might be, where we're not paying rent because we need to come in and do build out.
Oh, absolutely. That happens all the time. And it just depends on the number of months.
Have you seen or heard of, like 9 months or 10 months, or what is some of those numbers that, you could expect?
More typical of what I've seen is 3 to 6 months of free rent up front. And sometimes that can be looked at all different kinds of ways, as far as, like you mentioned, the term of the lease, how many years they're going to be in there, because you have to really consider it from a total lease value standpoint for the landlord and for the tenant, who's spending what in what areas and what makes sense so that it's a win-win for the profit generating side of that and for the expense side as the tenant. So you have to look at all those different aspects to see what might make sense for all the parties. But absolutely, there's opportunities to go in and have those conversations about a free rent period, who's spending the money on the build out, are we splitting that? I mean, all of those factors need to be considered in the deal structure.
And obviously, you can't say we're willing to do a 2-year lease with the first 6 months free. You've got to look at it from both sides of the equation. It's got to be a win-win and probably another win stuck in there at some point. But you have to be fair, and you can't hear 3 to 6 months and think that's just now the baseline that everyone's going to get that. That's where someone like yourself comes in to say, okay, here's all the factors, and here's the things that we want to accomplish. What if we could structure it this, and what if we could ask for that? And that's where your experience comes in, and that's where I think that people hearing this should realize that trying to go it on your own, or work with an owner, or work with putting the deal together yourself may not yield the result that you are looking for, because you can bring your experience and even the team aspect of bringing a whole holistic approach to the transaction. Is that something that becomes then apparent to the end result?
Oh, absolutely. All day long. Those are the things that we try to explain to people, and where there is a value add for working with an experienced broker that really does understand the nuances of deal structures and, the factors that matter to all the different parties, so that you can come in with clarity and understanding and hopefully get to that win-win like you were just talking about.
So what would you say is one of the mistakes that if someone is considering their commercial transaction, however that might look, what are some of the mistakes that people typically make, and then what do you guide them to get through those and avoid the mistakes?
Are you talking about if they come in and try to do it without a broker?
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what? Why don't we try it with like this? And I'm just kind of shot in the dark. Let's say they try to work with a broker, and then they're trying to do things like in the background, or they're even working against what you would be trying to help them with. Because I would think that also could happen, right?
Yeah. Yes, it definitely happens. So one of the things that we try to really explain in our processes when we begin the work with a new client is that setting expectations aspect, where everybody understands what everybody's role is in the transaction. And if we've done a great job of that, in the early stages of building that relationship with them, there's a lot of clarity around what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in the way that we're going to move through a transaction, because we are going to do everything in our power to make sure that we're leveraging every opportunity all throughout the process. If they're out there going renegade on some things and trying to do things under the radar, that's not going to serve the purpose, and it actually could hurt the way that the deal moves through the process. So we really do try to create expectations along those lines, so that everybody is really clear in how this and why it makes sense for them to work with us in that way and trust us through the process.
I literally was about to say, it makes me think of the old saying, trust the process. And you just said pretty much the same thing. And it's kind of like, here's the deal. I've been through this 1,001 times. You haven't. Or you've been through it twice, or it's been 10 years since you've gone through this. Let me guide you through this. Here's what we need to do first. Here's the outcome. Here's some of the steps. Here's why we're going to go this direction. And so when you as the broker are guiding the client through this, now they're kind of feeling, okay, yeah, I see that. And then maybe that makes them, because so many people feel like, I just want to jump in and help. And they're honestly thinking they're trying to help, but it's like, no, we've kind of, crossed paths, or we jumped ahead too soon, and no harm done. We can fix it. But I think that becomes something where it's like, let's work together like a well-oiled machine.
Absolutely. And I think that does come back to what I keep talking about in terms of communicating all of the steps throughout the process and really making our clients partners in the process so that there is always clarity around what's happening next. There's no confusion. Everybody's clear. We're moving through the process and everybody's on the same page.
100%. So let's wrap up with this. What would be one piece of advice that you would give someone when they're trying to think, okay, what's the next step? What is something that when you start to engage in a commercial real estate broker like yourself, that this will get you off of the right foot most all the time?
I'd say you need to call and talk to several different options and meet with them as far as kind of previewing what their style and their methods are to make sure it's a good fit for your business, for the size of your business, for the goals of your business. There's brokers that work on various aspects and specialize in various things. So being really clear, it's not your, cousin's uncle's brother, just because that's the connection that you have, but really being honest and clear about what it is that you need for your investment goals, and does that person have the track record that speaks to you, and the dynamic, in the relationship that's important as well. So I'd say being really clear about what that looks like for you and what you want through that process, and talking to people to make sure that there's a good fit.
And that makes 100% sense, because one of my clients, I mentioned, I kind of have a funny little thing, like, you don't want to call Billy Bob at his brother's truck, which is just like the generic, the person that has no clue what they're doing. So yeah, your cousin's brother's person that might have gotten their license years ago that might be able to stab in the dark and figure this deal. No, why don't we get someone that's an expert and a specialist in the commercial real estate transactions, and then has one extra thing. And I'll just ask this last question and then we can wrap up. It's not just you. If we were just relying on Shelley, Hillesheim, that's nice. You probably do a great job. But when you have to bring in some people from the Trinity team and surround yourself with like a mastermind, like people that have, been there and done that, you run into a hiccup in the transaction and you can go, ooh, how do we fix this? And someone comes, from the Trinity team and goes, ooh, here's how we fix this. You are not alone. And that brings like a massive benefit to your clients.
Oh, definitely. It is a huge value add in the process, because we do mastermind together. We meet regularly and talk about our deals and discuss how things are going and how we could do things differently. And do we need a piece of advice on this particular aspect? Because like I said, every deal is so unique that sometimes those set of circumstances, even though we've got veterans, absolute veterans in the business on the Trinity team, there's still nuances that are fresh and new, and we've got to find, something that fits in that circumstance. And we rely on each other for that process. And it is an immense value.
Yeah. Well, that's just spectacular. Thank you for coming on today. What's the best way that someone could reach out and connect with you?
The very best way is my cell phone. I'll give it to you right here. It's 303-249-9940. You can call or text, and I'm a very responsive human being, so give me a shout.
Awesome. Well, Shelley, thank you so much for coming on. It was a really good pleasure chatting with you about commercial real estate today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mike. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.